Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call to order a regularly scheduled Select Board meeting for March 27, 2018. The first item for consideration is to consider approval of the agenda.
I'd like to move to amend the agenda as follows, to change the order of numbers 5 and 6. I think sequentially, given some of Joe's updates, it makes more sense to address that first as number 5, and then logically board comment can follow from that. And then we'd like to move number 14 up as 6A, since again this will have some relevance to the conversation relating to Joe's update.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second. Is there discussion? Just as a quick comment for those of you who are following, these changes reflect the information today that Joe has received on his final contract approval by the receiving town, and we're just making some adjustments so that the flow of discussion tonight is in one direction. Hearing none, I'll call the question. Those approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The next order of business is to consider approving Select Board minutes of March 13, March 20, February 22nd, and February 20. We can take these in the order of that Joe has presented, beginning with February 20.
Move to approve the Select Board meeting minutes of February 20th, 2018.
Is there a second? Would depend on you, Josh, or me.
Sorry,
That's all right.
second. I was
Thank
just
you.
turning off my,
And discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Those approving signify by saying aye, please.
aye.
And nay, those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, 3 of us with 2 abstentions, and in the case of Mary, an abstention for reason of having not yet been elected. The next minutes are those of February 22nd. Is there a motion to approve?
So I guess on this one, Jerry, you have a little bit of an issue that the quorum,
We won't have 3 people.
so you're gonna have to approve it, I guess, with you and Jamie voting, and that's gonna have to be sufficient.
We'll just
Because
say
we
in
don't have a-
absentia.
We had a quorum of the former board, but not a quorum of the current board.
These were, this was the occasion of the event of Chief Noble's pinning, where 3 of us were there, but did not do, there was no activity of a board as such.
Move to approve the Shelburne Select Board meeting minutes of February 22nd, 2018.
Second, is there discussion? Hearing none, Jamie and I assume will approve, which we've
Aye.
done.
Abstain.
And in that case, Joe, you'll make a record, and the remaining members are abstaining. In the case of March 20, is there a motion to approve?
We'll do March
So moved.
13th first. Or-
13.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm following
Well, they're all stapled
Yeah,
together.
it doesn't matter.
March 13. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the Shelburne Select Board meeting minutes of March 13th, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have some edits,
Okay.
and I don't know if that comes after the
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
Yes?
I'm sorry,
After.
After the
Thank you.
second.
Yep.
All right, then I'll second.
and is there discussion?
Yes. I have an edit on page 9. I believe I withdrew my friendly amendment.
Great, I'm glad.
That is, has a bullet next to it. It's 3/4 of the way down the page.
And you would like that struck?
Correct.
Is there any other discussion of the
I think
amendment?
the only change, then you'd have to just delete with friendly amendment
Yes.
from that next.
On page 9 at the bullet.
So and just to be clear, I think for Mary, that the edits actually will show up and on this meeting's meeting minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to be clear.
I'd like to call the question on Mary's amendment first, in which case those who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The amendment passes. Now as to the motion itself.
Confusing to me.
I'm sorry?
We'll call the question on the motion itself. Those who approve signify by saying aye,
Aye.
and those
Understand that.
opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And the remaining minutes are of March 20, which was our recent executive session on the cellular matter. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the Shelburne Select Board meeting minutes of March 20th, 2018.
And a second?
Second.
So moved.
A second by Mary. Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
My only comment, sorry, was just generally we should add last names for folks who the public may not know, like Tim. That's all. We should
That's
just
a
insert
good
his last
point, yeah.
name. I don't even know his
Pass
last
that
name.
on to Mary Ann,
Okay.
yeah.
Not
That goes to
substantive, but more, oh, this is
We
Jerry.
value familiarity, but
Yeah,
for posterity's sake,
we don't
that
need
may
to
be-
amend it necessarily, but
yeah.
just going forward.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Those who are approving the minutes as presented of March 20, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. The next item of business is public comments. Are there any? Hearing none, thank you. And the following item is now, what was number 6 on your agenda, which has now been moved to the position of number 5, and that's the town manager report.
Okay, real quick, I do want to update the board that we are interviewing currently for the highway maintainer position that's open, so we have done at least one interview, and there'll be another one or two that are coming up, and we have an interview committee that Paul Goodrich obviously is running for that. The DRB coordinator, I think some of you know that Kate Mitchell is leaving. She's going to go to graduate school in the fall. And we have given a letter of hire to a candidate who hopefully will have his mind made up by the end of the week, whether or not he's going to take the position. In the meantime, we will most likely, although this isn't necessarily set in stone, we did this in between Annie and Kate. We contracted with the Regional Planning Commission to have some hours for someone there to sit in and fill that position. And that will be important to do, especially now as spring is coming. We kind of get an uptick in decks and sheds and stuff like that, as the DRB would certainly know. So we're moving on that. I do also want to make a note. I don't want to talk about this too much. I know we have a sitting member of the DRB, but for the select board to know that the DRB approval, Mary's going to be able to help me with this, for the library did come back. It was approved with some conditions, and the library is now working with the fire department to work through some of the conditions. There's some tension between what the DRB may want and what the fire department may want. We sat down last week, and I think we found some solutions. Again, I don't want to say too much. We have at least one member of the DRB here. Also, I want to say I found out today that Mark Koziak, I believe I'm pronouncing that name right, he was a young reporter for the Shelburne News, and I thought he did a really fantastic job. He's moving on to bigger and better, or at least something different. He did an excellent job. There was at least one story that if it wasn't for him, quite frankly, we wouldn't have solved a very complicated matter because of his investigative reporting skills. He was able to dig up some and ask questions that no one else was asking. So I thought he did a great job for the Shelburne News, especially for a young guy, and definitely want to give him my best. I thought he did a great job. And then finally, as I let the select board and staff know, I signed the contract with the Hanover Board of Selectmen, and they signed it at their meeting last night. So that is official now. It's been kind of 2 weeks in limbo, just because that's the process that's had to take place. So I know it was a little uncomfortable for people on staff, not really knowing what's going on, and put everyone in a difficult situation, but that's been, the loop's been closed on that for the most part. I do want to stress to the board that, as I told Jerry over the phone, the winner of the 4x100 meter relay is not made up of the 4 fastest athletes, but of the team that passes the baton the best, without any drops, that they're smooth, it's not jerky. And I think it's a fundamental importance for everyone on staff and for the select board that we have as smooth of a transition as possible, both to an interim potentially, if that's what the board's will is, and then ultimately to whatever is going to be a permanent solution. I am certainly dedicated to ensuring as good of a transition as I can here and there. As I've told the board and people here, as long as I'm the town manager in Shelburne, you have my 100% effort, and whatever is next will happen when it's next. But I do want to stress to the board, I think that the rapidity, the quickness of kind of having a solution, at least for an interim, is important, and that we have a smooth transition, that I have a chance to go over everything that needs to be reviewed with whoever's going to sit in that chair. It can't stay vacant. There's too much to do. There's a lot of big projects that are coming up that can't be just dispersed to existing staff. Existing staff is stressed to the max as it is. And even all the large projects that I pointed out to the board, the library, the wastewater and water budgets, the union negotiations, that doesn't even count all the day-to-day activities that are just countless. So that seat cannot stay cold at all. And again, I hope there can be a very smooth transition so that the business of the town can continue.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Joe. Would anyone like to comment on the board? Colleen?
Just that, I mean, we know that Joe and I started at the exact same time. That was when I won my first election, and so we really learned on the job for the last 4 years, and it's been just a pleasure to sit on the board next to you,
Thank you.
except for the brief period of time in which somebody else sat next to you,
Right.
and now I'm back.
No, again, just public congratulations, Joe. It's
you.
been a pleasure working with you. It's not goodbye yet. We have a
That's
couple
right.
meetings, so
Yeah, a couple more meetings.
yes, congrats.
Thank you.
Mary?
I'd like to add, I wish you all the luck. I did have the pleasure of speaking with somebody from Hanover, Massachusetts. I told our town manager he's going to have to develop his Massachusetts accent. And I was able to say I haven't had the chance to work with Joe on the select board, but I actually had a similar experience, Colleen, that you did, because it wasn't long after he got here that I put in my application for the DRB, and from that moment on, Joe has always been very helpful and very generous with his time. And I had what I said to Mr. Healy from Hanover, I'll say to everybody, is I think you work really, really hard. I can send Joe an email on Saturday, and I'll get a response on Saturday. And it's a 24, I admire that you take this as a 24/7 job.
Thank you.
And I think you'll serve Hanover well. And just remember to figure out where that liquor star is.
Right, right.
Josh?
Yeah. Yeah, I can repeat that and wish you all the best in your new pursuits and hope it goes smoothly for you.
Thank you, Josh.
We're sorry, of course, to see you go, and but happy for you and your family at what is a very wonderful career move, and we wish you every success in that.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'll continue with a couple more comments with, if everybody's okay. It is the time of year, although we're taking a risk with curse, that we thank the Public Works for a long winter of clean roads, safe roads. It does not happen easily, automatically, really, or without a considerable effort on the part of Paul and the crew. And hopefully they won't be called out anytime soon from now, but we're probably overdue thanking them. Joe's resignation will be formally accepted by us with one intermediate step, and that is for the board and Joe to agree on contract modifications. Those are, in principle, matters that have to do with his release date, as well as the effective date, if any, of a projected salary increase. There may be other issues, And later in as we consider the next item, considering a date for our retreat, I would like to just take a few minutes at that point to sum up what our options are in that regard. That is accepting his resignation. Meantime, we'll go on to, with the board's indulgence, number 7, which is discuss the comprehensive plan timeline and process with the Planning Commission, representation of which is here tonight along with Dean.
Are we
I
going
have
to-
two more,
14?
comments,
Oh,
and also
I'm sorry.
14A.
Yeah.
I do have a
Okay.
comment.
oh, I'm sorry. I thought our colleague.
No, I thought we were just gonna discuss the
retreat.
the 6A.
I think we're-
6A.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
didn't fit,
Before
we
we went
didn't
to
do,
7.
we didn't really do 5, though, did we?
Yeah.
Select board comments, well, we commented
Okay.
on,
On
Okay.
Joe.
Oh, I
I'm
got
sorry.
it, I got it,
Other
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I'm sorry to delay things, but I did want to say that I had the opportunity to visit with Chris Robinson at the wastewater treatment plant. And it was so informative, and I've driven by the wastewater treatment plant probably more times than I can count and never really noticed it. What I want to tell everybody in the audience and my colleagues on the board is that it's obvious, but we don't think about it. The wastewater treatment plant operates 24/7, 365. It is probably one of the single most important assets and most valuable assets in our town. And if you have never seen how it operates, I encourage you, I'm sorry, Chris, but I encourage you to call Chris and meet with him. It was extremely interesting, and I now understand how a vital piece of our town works and how expensive it is to run. We actually have 2 wastewater treatment plants by historical accident. We really should only have 1. And the wastewater treatment plant needs to be upgraded and upgraded soon. And it will be a very expensive process to do. And it needs to be upgraded to meet federal rules in terms of how we emit into the lake. So I'll stop there. I encourage you to all understand how that piece, that utility that we have in Shelburne works. Because when you understand how it works, it will be easier for you to make an educated vote when time comes to figure out how we're going to spend money to keep it up to speed. It will be an important process that we'll be dealing with as time goes. But if you don't visit it, you're missing out on an important asset of our town. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to mention a reminder that at the last meeting, we offered an expanded select board rules of procedure, which Joe has said that will be available on the website.
It is on the website. We'll just put it in a more obvious place.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we'll get the link, and I think it would be helpful if everybody who is interested could look at it and review it and offer any comments. If you want to send them with everybody's agreement to me, I'll try to correlate them, and put them into an order so we can look at them when we look at that.
Thank you, Josh. Colleen?
Just in addition to what Mary just said, when I joined the board, we actually went around as a select board to all of kind of like the vital parts of the town. So, you know, Paul took us to go and look at different parts of roads that in different states of repair. And, you know, we went to the fire department, we went to the police station, we went, and then I think that day it didn't work out to go to the water treatment plant, so I went separately. I think Tony Supple did as well. And we went around and looked at bridges, like the Bay Road Bridge, and looked at the state of disrepair. And I mean, like, really looked at it, as in climbed down underneath the bridge and looked at it. And all these things really do have an impact. It really does help you understand in a way that you can't just by looking at the papers and hearing people come in and give presentations about it. And so I don't know if it's something that we want to consider at the retreat, is planning something like that when the weather's a little bit better. But I don't know if, I mean, like, you know, you've seen one aspect of it, with the water treatment plan. Have you been around to see any of that?
I've
And I
seen the
don't,
police station. Aaron
Yeah.
gave me a tour of the station.
and I don't know
That's
if
it. I
Josh
agree.
and
I'd
Jerry,
like
if you
to.
guys did when you guys came on the board, but it might be
did.
good to resurrect that.
It's a good idea.
You know, rescue building.
Yeah, we did the, we did.
Yeah, and I'm
the
quite
tour.
sure there's
Good
probably
idea.
like 5 things I'm forgetting, but those are the ones that I
It's a
remember right
really
now.
good idea, Colleen, yeah.
Parks and Rec too, probably.
Yeah, the different areas,
And
like the
maybe we
beach.
could all get out and play a game.
Right. Team building, yeah.
No comments.
The next item, despite my eagerness to get to you, is 6A, which encompasses a part of our planning now for search and interim management. But before I lay out briefly what I think our options are, I'm going to ask Josh to fill us in on whether we have an agreeable time or date beginning with next week. You recall, we were trying to put a retreat date together. If it turns out we don't, or we're short more than we wish, then the option might be a special meeting. In any case, sooner than later, so.
Okay. Yeah, I think there are 2 questions for the board at this point. It seems to be a challenge to come up with a date and time that everybody's available. So I think the 2 questions are, and I'll talk about what we have so far, is so far we've tried to do it through a couple of doodle polls. And I'm open to other suggestions on how to best sort of coordinate people's times, because we have some success in arranging at least one opportunity. So if there are any other ideas of how to do it, or the second is to deal with the issue of, okay, if we can't get all 5 members together at once, what's the, is 4 okay, is, 3's getting a little skimpy, but, and how do we make those kinds of decisions? Because as of now, we have April 3rd from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.
6 to 9.
Without Colleen's availability, and then at the same day from 6 to 9, we don't have Mary's availability.
do
Wait,
it.
I thought Mary said she could.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
super.
oh, that's great.
That's
And then
why I was a
that-
little confused when you sent it back out again. I thought we had a
Yeah.
consensus.
No, well,
Oh,
that's
super.
that's not what it came up in the poll, so.
Yeah, she'd
I
sent an email
you
and said it didn't.
My bad.
Okay, all right, maybe that's why. Okay,
Okay for April 3rd?
yeah, so April 3rd would be the April 3rd from 6 to 9.
Everybody agree?
It's a Tuesday.
It's like a regular select board meeting.
And we don't have a location yet, right? Yeah.
Nope, we can figure that out.
Okay.
I mean, I think offline, I don't think it's I think we're okay with Vermont open meeting law if we're just making plans that I'll find a place that that works. And
Sure.
I mean, I guess I'm going into it planning on dinner being part of it, but we'll work that out between now and next Tuesday. Good.
Great, super.
So you're gonna make a motion to warn that?
Yes,
Move to warn a select board retreat for Tuesday, April 3rd, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., location to be announced.
thank you, Colleen. Is there a second?
Second.
So,
Jamie seconded. Is there any further discussion?
And I'll just make sure that's announced and posted by Friday.
Okay, and I would like, I think, since it's shorter than what we do, I doubt it, I think we're gonna have to have another, version 2 or second. And so, the doodle poll's up for May, and there are a couple people who have did that, so I think that's gonna be the first time that we're gonna be able to engage again, at the beginning of
This
May.
was the second portion that we
Second.
wanted to have once a new manager was in
Right.
place, so. we
Oh,
would
no,
be-
I thought, That's possible too. We may have
Yeah,
to have
that's what I
another.
was thinking.
It was mostly if we didn't get through the, what we wanted to get through next week.
Any other discussion? Call the question. Those who approve Colleen's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it unanimously. That's a big help, because what we are looking at in the way of tasks now are not only search for a new manager, but interim management for the period of time that Joe will be gone until a new manager could in all likelihood be in place. That time may be as long as 2 months. It could extend further, depending upon the availability of whomever's chosen later this spring to be the new manager. Interim management and search have some common features. They can be conducted by, in the case of search, a citizens committee in and of itself. Interim management could be administered by an individual in and of him or herself. In both cases, there could be contractual support of varying kinds. In the case of interim management, it could be someone who is employed as a part-time administrator. All of these questions are necessarily those that we need to discuss at some length. The timing of it is such that were we now able to do so on April 3rd, we could come back on the 10th, our next regularly scheduled meeting, and discuss it further to the point of decision. I think sooner than later is the byword. A search has its own time frame. It's unique unto itself. It can be extended for many, many reasons. But the interim management is a near need. So this provides us now with the knowledge that we can all meet next Tuesday night with an opportunity to discuss this in freer form, make some tentative, come to some tentative conclusions, and come back on the 10th and make some decisions as to how we're going to proceed. Would anyone like to comment on?
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the meeting next Tuesday is a public meeting. It's an open meeting, whether it's here or someplace else. And it's not,
Right.
it's just like now there'll probably be less structure, but it is something that everyone's invited to.
I'm not sure that's true.
That's true.
It's true.
That's true.
Well, if it's just to discuss, and I'm happy to stand corrected, but if it's administrative in nature, are we going to be talking about anything substantive or just?
Well, it would also be to address the issues that have been identified. I mean, we would make use of, in other words, a strategic planning session called a retreat as an opportunity for us to sit. It couldn't take up the majority of the time. No, it shouldn't. But we would then conduct it as a retreat, as has been generally done before.
Thanks for the clarification.
I was going to say, to that end, does it make sense as we develop that agenda to warn interim management as a decision item in the event that we do get to a point where we
It
have
could-
alignment on a
it-
decision, and just to save a week, given,
It could be both.
instead of
actually,
sitting for a
an
week
item like a
doing
search.
nothing on the interim piece, I wonder, could we at least warn it in
yeah.
case we agree
that
that this
provision.
is the
Yep.
best approach?
Yeah.
Yep,
It's a
Agreed.
public meeting, right? It may,
agreed. I think that's sensible, because we may come to agreement on some features of the search as well. If not all, at least some, like the matter of a citizens committee.
Right.
And proceed from there, so.
okay, good.
Okay. The last set of comments has to do with accepting the resignation, which I indicated earlier that was dependent upon some modifications. We have several options even tonight on how to do that, one of which is on the agenda as an executive session. The other options are in no particular order. We could wait until the next regularly scheduled meeting, which doesn't seem useful. We could delegate two of us to sit with Joe in the next following days, the next couple of days, and reach agreement on the modifications at board delegation and conclude acceptance at that time. And we could discuss it in some other fashion, even tonight, here out loud, in public, except I don't know that all of us are prepared at this point to do that. I would favor asking all of us to delegate, two of us, to sit with Joe in the next couple of days to complete the modifications, and on that basis, accept his resignation on behalf of all of us.
Is that a motion, or?
Okay,
That's a suggestion, and if someone would like to make a motion to that effect,
I would make a motion to that effect.
thank you.
and then do we want to appoint two, I mean, Jerry, I would assume you and Jamie would be natural candidates for that, and you both have time to do that in the
Yeah,
next
see,
couple of days?
I'm a little strapped on availability for, if we want to do it the next 2 days, I can't do it.
But was there anything in,
So-
based on the conversation that you and I had earlier, there weren't a lot of
No,
issues? I mean, is this something that we could, talk about tonight and then just be done with it?
are you aware of there are no principal issues other than your release date and foregoing the
My
increase?
recommendation to the board would be that we, I think it's totally appropriate for us to enter into executive session to talk
Okay.
about the contract. I think it would take 5 minutes or less, and
Yeah.
I would like to think that we could have an agreement after that could be announced publicly.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure, I mean, as you said, if there's nothing really, I mean, your contract is a public document. I'm not quite sure what we accomplish necessarily in executive session, that unless you think that there are,
The
Still, it's a
negotiations aren't
negotiation.
public,
Yeah.
right? That's what's
well,
accepted from.
How about we proceed with, are you not free until Friday?
Friday I probably could, but if somebody else has bandwidth to do it.
So why
I mean,
can't we
perfectly
just,
fine.
why
Yeah,
can't we just do
I'm
this in
happy to do it
executive session
Yeah,
tonight?
I
Let's
think
just do
we
it
could bang
tonight.
out tonight. I agree.
I think we can just do it tonight.
Have finality, and it is a negotiation of an employment matter. I would favor executive session as well.
Okay.
All right, what's your pleasure, gang?
So we need to amend the agenda.
We do it
No,
tonight?
it's-
Return to the
It's on the
agenda?
agenda.
It's on the
Number
agenda.
16?
Yeah, it's already on the
And-
agenda.
Can we
Take
do
it
it
when it
where,
comes.
where it falls?
Yep.
Yes.
So let's move on.
Okay.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Now, we're ready and waiting.
And if you want to give me do a quick introduction, I'm Jason Diener here, but the comprehensive plan is going to be before both the Planning Commission, ultimately the Select Board this year. And ideally, the Planning Commission and the Select Board can be somewhat on the same wavelength, so when the plan is presented to the board later this year, it's at least in the ballpark of what this board would be willing to adopt. So, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Joe and other members. With me tonight, or the folks I'm with, not constituting a quorum, are the Chair of the Planning Commission, Jason Brennan, and Andrew Everett, and Dick Elkins, and that is it. There may be some members watching at home online or through TV. I'm going to present a few slides. I know that there was a page included in your meeting packet. The things that I'm going to run through supplement or in some respects update that. I have copies to hand out and will project the slides for people to see, and then I would just, I will send the file to Joe so they can be posted to the town's website. This is scheduled for 15 minutes, so if it's okay, I'm just gonna jump in and unless you have any comments. Okay, so, first to set the stage, what is the comprehensive plan? What are the elements that it needs to include? It's a primary expression of municipal policy relating to growth and development. That's one way of describing it. It's a guide or blueprint, people will sometimes call it, or a to-do list, or both of those things. A comprehensive plan is something that is required before a municipality can have land use regulations. It's also something that is required or very advantageous when it comes to applying for municipal grants. There is a section of state law that spells out what the contents of the town plan are to be. You don't have to have a town plan as a municipality, but if you have a town plan, you must have certain features. There are 12 specific what are called elements but they can be mixed and matched and combined and done in different ways, and that will become apparent momentarily. There's also a series of 14 goals in state law. There are some more than 14. The plan can optionally address those. I say optionally only because technically it's optional, but if you use the plan the way Shelburne and most other communities use them to support things like impact fees and other kind of special authorities, you need to have a plan that's reviewed and approved, and to have a reviewed and approved plan, you need to address the goals. The select board members will have this excerpt from a document that spells out in detail what those sections are. They include a statement of objectives for growth in the town, a land use plan, which is language and a map. A transportation plan is another required element, a utility and facility plan, and that includes everything from roads and wastewater treatment plants, as one of your members was speaking about earlier, to other things. A statement of policies on the preservation of rare and irreplaceable natural areas. There are a couple of different sections of the law that have to do with natural features in the environment. An educational facilities plan, a recommended program for implementation. So basically the plan somehow have to say how the town aims to accomplish the things that it wants to accomplish. An energy plan, that's taken on greater importance lately because the town is trying to have its plan have more impact in the development review process that applies to things like renewable energy facilities. So the energy plan has to be kind of upgraded in order to do that. A housing element is another important part, an economic development plan, and a flood resiliency plan. That's one of the new things. But anyway, this will be posted online. Members, you will be able to read the details later. This is a modified version of the chart that was included in your packet. And it's simply a table that distills sections of the plan as they have been historically presented in Shelburne. Like I said, there are those required elements, but the law says you can mix them up and combine them. You can even do things that are not required. You can go above the minimum, and Shelburne has done that. In the case of telecommunications, there's no requirement for a telecommunications section, or we call it a towers and telecommunications section. But this table lists the elements as they have historically been shown in the plan. It makes the point that there are members of the Planning Commission who have taken on a lead role in the development of those sections. And then the next column is a very approximate estimate of degree of completion of those sections. Some of them are in a state where the document is essentially in a small pile along with other sections that we feel could be given to someone who is going to reformat the document. Others have a way to go before we're at that point. And then the last column simply highlights the fact that there are some relatively new requirements in the statute, things that our plan didn't have when it was approved last time, wasn't required to have, but a new plan will be required to have. And I mentioned energy earlier. There are expanded requirements for energy if we want to have this elevated status, and the discussions over the last couple of years have indicated that is the desire. There's flood resiliency, which is a new section, and then there are additional requirements having to do with natural resources and certain mapping of certain features. So I'm going to just keep going if there aren't any other questions, and then transition to the adoption process. I'm not going to try to summarize, perhaps members of the Planning Commission will, to characterize how the plan that's in development now speaks differently, or are thematic differences between it and the current plan. We can revisit that if you would like. The adoption process, it's spelled out in state law. It boils down to the steps that are shown in this bullet. The Planning Commission is the body that prepares the plan and basically presents its ideas to the public. It holds a public hearing. It holds at least one formal, legally warned public hearing. It can hold others, and it should hold others. When it's done the hearing process, and the commission says this is the document that it feels it should move on to the select board, decides that, okay, it's complete, and they vote to forward it to the select board, and then the select board receives it, and because of Shelburne's size, you have to hold 2 hearings on that. The select board can revise the document, but if there are revisions, there have to be more hearings. But ultimately, the process, if it's successful, ends in a vote to adopt, and the plan would go into effect immediately, the new plan would. This is the main overview. It gets a little more tortured if you want to know things like how many days have to elapse between getting a notice in the newspaper and then holding a hearing. There are 30-day requirements. We have to send this to surrounding towns and to the regional planning commission in the state. That takes 30 days. There's a minimum of 15 days between a notice appearing in the newspaper and a hearing taking place. Long story short, all of these requirements add up in time. And when you lay them out, perhaps where I should have begun is at the end, and that is, well, when does the current plan expire? Because the current plan will expire if the select board hasn't adopted a new one. And that plan will expire in February of 2019. So we're less than a year away from needing to have a new town plan unless we're prepared to live without one until a new one is adopted. It's not the end of the world if the plan expires and it takes some time to adopt a new one, but there are implications and we can talk about that. But this chart, which I think is the last one that I was going to show, and it's similar to one that, or it's an expanded version of one that you had in your packets, works backwards, and I apologize because the type is a little smaller projected than I would like, but working backward, plan expiration if no adoption, this is shown basically by month, and because both of these groups, the Select Board and the Planning Commission, meet twice a month, second and fourth Thursdays, second and fourth Tuesdays, it's helpful to think in terms of that schedule for meetings, because that's when things will take place unless there's a special meeting. So if we look at a deadline of the middle of February, and we assume that the very last chance for the Select Board to adopt it would be at the end of a second hearing, that second hearing would be at your first meeting in February of 2019. If that's hearing number 2, then hearing number 1 at the absolute latest could be at the second meeting in January. Okay? Now, if we work backwards, we're getting into the time period of the holidays. The Select Board would be receiving it, because remember, we can't have hearings without having notices. So the latest, if we assume that there's not going to be any slipping, for the Select Board to move it along would be at your second meeting in December. That's the 28th. Now, that's a crazy time of year. So I don't know what the plan will be, but both of the bodies, the Planning Commission and the Select Board, need to be thinking about that. If the aim is to have a new plan by the deadline. If the decision is made that some other approach will be taken, we just need to know it, and everyone needs to know it. Alternative date to the second meeting in December would be if things break our way, it happens earlier, but that would create a little bit of breathing room in the event there are changes. But there's not much room to navigate with this schedule. This is a saving it up for the last minute type of schedule, and it wasn't by choice really. It's because that's the deadline, and the assumption is we're trying to develop a schedule that will meet the deadline. Working back from Select Board having receiving it in either the first or the second meeting in December, that would be based on the Planning Commission getting its hearing. It has to have only one hearing. Having that hearing possibly at the first meeting in November if things are lucky, and that would be great because it could go to the Select Board sooner, give more breathing room. November's, I think Jason has made the point, it's kind of a crazy time. Second Thursday corresponds with Thanksgiving, it's a tough time of year. The absolute latest, and that's why these are in red, would be the first meeting in December for the planning commission to hold its hearing or hold a final legal public hearing and then vote to send it on to the select board. Working back from that, we have 30 days prior to that hearing, whatever that is, to distribute to surrounding communities. That has us looking at October as a place where the hearing draft is finalized, and the hearing date is set. So we basically don't want to be getting close to October without everything in order. Now, this moving back in time, closer to the present, is where things get a little bit more open. We have a line here for the maps and the attachments being resolved, finalized by early September. We have in the summer the idea that there would be at least a couple of informal hearings on a draft version of the plan. Now that draft might not touch on everything, but it would be a document that would be in the kind of shape that people could respond to and help shape before the planning commission gets to the point where it has to warn it for a public hearing, and it's a bit more formal at that point. So there we're talking about summer. It's not always considered the best time, but under the constraints, we really have to try, the planning commission has to try to do something at that point to get as much input as it can. The longer it would wait to do that, the more pressure it's going to create in here. And then there's a red flag here for what we call the complete draft available at the beginning of July, first meeting in July. And that's so that we know what it is that the public is going to be asked to respond to if we have some informal public meetings in July and August, and either combination, whatever combination seems best suited at the time. We don't want to have public meetings like that where we expect people to show up without having made some solid effort to get people aware of it and have the setting be one where people can actually attend and voice their thoughts. That was it, and I know that we're pressed for time. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I would just say that what we've been doing is focusing on content. The format, there's going to be any number of opinions, and that becomes its own thing. I believe that we were looking at having an alpha draft sooner than July 1st. July 1st
Yeah.
will be
That's
the draft that we're looking at really putting through. So I would encourage, just to the public, if there's a topic where there are opinions, to please see those warnings and show up and provide your comments so that we can get those considered. This becomes really important because once we get into the formal process of warning hearings and getting data out there, if things get challenged and we have to go back and redo stuff, that injects time and we're not going to be able to hit February of 2019. So engagement sooner than later if you have inputs, and I would request the same thing of the select board, and I would be happy to make myself available as well to review any particular sections or language as needed and take those back to the committee for revision. I guess the important thing would be that alpha draft, which I think was targeted for sometime in the roughly May-ish.
end of May.
End of May.
Probably realistic.
Yeah, and it could just be it'll be an alpha draft, so more something that you can skim, make sure that the content is what you're looking for, recognizing that the formatting will probably be, will be updated and streamlined and made consistent.
One minor addition, I mentioned the fact that there are individual planning commissioners who have been identified as the lead for different sections. There are committees that have been playing a pretty significant role in the work on the plan so far. The Natural Resources Committee has been very involved, the PAS Committee has been involved, the Housing Subcommittee has become involved. So there are other town committees that have been participating in the work on the plan, which is very, very helpful. But to emphasize Jason's point, we haven't heard from individual members of the community who are always able to come to a meeting of the Planning Commission when the topics are discussed. It's a different topic from meeting to meeting. But that's where we would hear from individuals as opposed to any group.
Would anyone like to ask a question? Jason and Dean? Member comments?
No, it just seems like a lot of hard work, and so, thank you. I don't know when you get the time to do it all, but
If you haven't spent much time with the town plan, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a extraordinary amount of work, and thank you, obviously, to the entire commission for all the work to date. There's a lot to do still. I can attest to how much work's involved with this. You guys are making good headway. One question I had is, it looks like there's no slack in the event that we have substantive changes following our acceptance of the draft following your hearing. Is that right?
Once it hits the July, yeah, things
Okay.
are pretty tight, very little wiggle room, which is why the request for comment sooner than later. And we will focus on trying to get an alpha draft to you for review as soon as possible. I do just want to comment that, yeah, there is a lot of work that's been put into this, and thank you, Dean, for mentioning the committees and everybody else on the commission. A couple of commissioners here, definitely a tremendous amount of work. So thank you to all of you.
And just one last reaction to that. It is extremely tight, and it's assuming or expecting a lot from any select board to look at a schedule like that and to say, oh, okay, we can work with that because it puts you in a box, a very, very small box. If the board's reaction was, it just seems like too much and it's leaving too much at the end, there are different ways that a plan could be put together. It would just have to be less ambitious than the path that we're on right now. I mean, part of the reason for checking the boxes that highlight the sections that are new requirements is that those should be priorities. If there were things that would be considered nice additions, but they're going to take a long time to resolve, maybe they would be delayed. Again, the goal is to meet the deadline so that the focus can be on the sections that are new requirements.
And does the RPC approval happen prior to the plan expiration date, or?
So, the way that regional approval can work under statute is that it can happen before or after. The Regional Planning Commission has a set of guidelines. Ideally, on one of the versions, they can look at a draft. So ideally, that the written request to the Regional Planning Commission would be made. My recommendation would be made that it goes to them at the end of October or early November. So they are looking at a draft, which we're assuming is not going to change dramatically, so that it happens at about the same time as the approval, or that it's a contingent approval. And there are policies that the RPC has developed and clarified over the years that are an attempt to work with communities. But it can, under the statute, happen before or after.
Do bad things happen if it doesn't get approved by 2/29?
Implications of having an expired plan include things like not being able to use the municipal plan in an Act 250 proceeding. You couldn't participate in Act 250 and maintain that a development does or does not conform with a plan as part of criterion 10 if you don't have a plan in effect. It doesn't mean that the town couldn't participate. It's just going to reduce by one of the criteria. It would come into play with things like grant applications. It would potentially come into play with things like impact fees. It would mean, and this is a fairly significant one, that there would not be any bylaw amendments in that period of time. The priority would have to be on getting a plan in effect before amendments could be passed. Those are the big
Yeah.
ones.
So, I mean, Jamie, like you have the most experience. Is there specific areas of the plan that you felt needed to be focused on in addition to
Yeah,
the,
I think what they highlighted, right, it'll be energy,
in
flood
addition to the new
resiliency,
ones?
and I don't know how much is changing with respect to natural resources. Maybe it looks like there's a new statutory element for,
There are some new requirements within the what would logically be in the natural resources section, having to do with habitat blocks and mapping of those areas and having policies for it.
And is there
And
anything,
I should say, there is a lot of work going on in that section right now.
is there anything in addition to those 3 new additions that you feel needs to be redone before others? Like if you had to put them on a wish list of priorities?
There's an argument for a lot of different things. I think that we have accounted for that priority to some degree. Some of our scheduling has gotten into slotting around people's availabilities and schedules. So where we can, I think we have prioritized to make sure that, especially the statutory things and areas that we know really do need to be redone. Because as a worst case fallback, as I think you were alluding to, a lot of these sections could stay in the same format in an absolute worst case, but each section has been modified in some way just through input and discussion. So ideally, we would like all of it to go through.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason, members of the commission, Dean. We look forward to that. The next item is to receive an update from the Stormwater Advisory Committee to consider reaffirming their mission and consider appointing a Select Board liaison.
I can start it off. I know
Cue this up.
Chris Davis is here. He's the one of the members of the Stormwater Advisory Committee. So is Chris Robinson, our water quality. Yeah, he's there. Superintendent. So the last time the SWAC, Stormwater Advisory Committee, came before the Select Board, it must have been in November. And at that time, it was a different board, of course. The Select Board at the time agreed with the direction that the SWAC was headed, which was to go forward actively investigating a stormwater utility, and to attempt to have that in place by July 1st, 2019. So the purpose of the visit here, not only to have a Select Board liaison to the SWAC, but also to have this board, which is a new board, reaffirm or not its that the direction that the committee is going is the direction that you want it to go, because of course they work for you. So if there's a change to mission, it'd be good to know that before they start marching off into the future under the current understanding of developing the utility. And then again to kind of reaffirm that the timeline is sufficient, because if it is, the SWAC needs to really start getting out to the public vetting process, which they will start doing pretty much ASAP if the Select Board is still agreeable to what it's doing. But that's enough from me. Chris is here. And
Dick Elkins is here.
Dick is also a member of the Stormwater Advisory Committee. Thank you. So if there's any questions, or if you guys want to go forward, and I would just say that it is a complicated topic that the members of the SWAC can attest, and if someone on the board or in the public thinks that they're going to be able to grasp it in November when you first look at it, you're kidding yourself. If you really want to have meaningful input into this issue, which I consider the issue for the year, I recommend you get on top of it now and not wait, because it is very complex.
Well, thanks, Joe. I mean, I'm Chris. Dick is here. There's 6 other members of the committee. Dick, myself, 5 other members of the community that are on that committee. We are serving at your pleasure. It's complicated. It's taken a bunch of us that were not totally in the loop on this to get up to speed. We're looking at the draft ordinances now, but pending how all of you guys, and Joe, did a schedule went in their packet, right?
Yes.
So I don't mean to add to your workload, but when seeing Dean's presentation, and again, you guys control this. The stormwater fees and things that are happening now in stormwater administratively and things the town has to do are currently in your budget for this coming year. It could continue that way, but if you want to move along the process to put some type of utility format in place and move forward in 18 with an ordinance process, public hearings and your board deciding to do what you need to do with it, it basically is almost paralleling what Dean was just presenting. It means through the summer, having the process and the hearings and maybe having an ordinance ready for you guys for your approval end of the year, first of next year, so that you would then be, working toward how the fees and billing would happen and all the public outreach that goes into that would be going on throughout, as according to the schedule, for 19, for the summer, late summer of 19, for the bills to go out along with other, the water. The theory we've been working on right now is, and Chris could explain how utility type format, there's lots of flexibility for your board how you want to administer it. But basically, the thought would be to incorporate the billing that would happen with the stormwater to cover the town's costs would go out as part of, it would be added on to a utility bill, be right on the water and sewer bills. There'd be a separate line for the stormwater portion. And your staff has been great on figuring out how to do this cost effectively. Chris or Joe can speak that you guys did receive a grant recently.
Yes, sorry.
Which is great news. 25,000, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. I forgot that we did, and again, thanks to Representative Brumstead to bring this to our attention, especially Ann. We did receive a $25,000 grant, which we of course are just able to match the money, kind of free money in our budget, specifically to help develop the utility or going forward. So
I guess I'm here to say the committee's there at your disposal. We're committed to it. There's a bunch of us where there's a lot of moving parts to that. Your staff has been excellent between Joe and Ann and Chris and Tom DePietro, your consultant. I think everybody, I can speak for the committee, Dick's here. I think I could say that all of us really appreciate how much knowledge and experience that the board, those staff members bring to this. But you guys drive the process on how you want to go forward and on what schedule. So you don't have to push it in. There's other ways to deal with it. It would get rolled into another year's budget if you wanted to hold off, or you can move forward, and really that's up to you guys. And we're there to serve how you choose to do it. And if you do choose to go forward, I think the idea of having a select board member, we thought maybe Jamie, because of your experience with planning and part of stormwater and some of the things. But the point is, I think it would be helpful if you do want the committee to go forward to have one of the members of your board attend some of those meetings that you can be part of when you can be. I mean, we do detailed minutes. The meetings are open to the public. They are warned. But having a board member, if you're going to go down the road toward an ordinance, I think having a board member involved at this stage going forward would make a lot of sense. So,
Chris, you want to add?
Yep, Chris Robinson, Water Quality Superintendent. So yes, I did just want to state that if we continue on the process that we're planning on now with the schedule, for a July 1st, 2019 budget, that means we have to have stuff ready in December for the budget, which means adoption of the ordinance hopefully would be done no later than the beginning of December. We have a September through December in the schedule right now. I just wanted to point that out because that's going to be a lot of work on your end to look at these and review them and stuff. So for the public hearing process. So we put in a little bit of wiggle room in there. So, but hopefully the deadline is the goal is to get it done by the beginning of December.
Questions, comments? Colleen?
Just that, we've known about the need for some way to finance the stormwater modifications for a long time. And so being able to come up with this committee has been huge. We've really appreciated all the work that you guys have put in so far. And the last thing I'd want to do is to lose momentum on it. What we need to do per state and federal regulations are going to come into play before we have a way of financing it. And that was the whole point of being able to develop the utility. So I'm definitely in favor of trying to maintain this schedule as closely as we can, and doing whatever we can to make that happen. And I do definitely see a utility for having a select board member as part of this. And it was very useful in the library project. and just to have that constant communication. And see, good communication. I think that's about, yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Mary?
I think Jamie's an obvious choice for that. I don't, you know.
How do you feel, Jamie?
Yeah.
Sorry.
They're asking for you, Jamie.
I'll let Mary finish and then I'll.
If you're willing
No,
to
of course.
serve, I mean, it's not very
I-
nice to volunteer someone else.
No.
Usually we only do that when you're not here.
Yeah, I would be honored and thrilled to do it. There's so much good energy and momentum, as you said, with this group, and we have such expertise in the room at this point that I would be happy to help. I definitely advocate for not taking our foot off the pedal, and let's get it over the finish line and do the work. And as you said, it'll be a lot of work in the next year plus to get it done, but now's the time to get it completed, and it's a more equitable approach, right? I think it makes sense for the town and the community to do it.
So I did just want to comment real quick.
Chris Robinson.
We're currently meeting on the first and third Tuesdays of the month.
Good evening.
At 3 p.m.
Oh,
So I just wanted to make sure,
Okay.
you know, that doesn't mean
Be
that.
here all day.
Yeah, there you go.
Josh?
Yeah, I just sort of want to take a step back to, I guess, when this was brought up in November and sort of ask if there had been any new developments on the idea that had been brought up from a regional approach to stormwater. That obviously recently there's been efforts to regionalize other local things, which there were some concerns over. But to me, this always seems to be, stormwater is something that is more regional than related to specific towns. So I wondered if that has been, if there's anything new that has been discussed about that from a regional perspective, or what are other towns doing in this regard. Certainly, I think there are a lot of benefits to the whole utility idea, but sort of in the way the arguments have been made in the past for regionalization is duplication of efforts, with regard to financing and equipment and everything else. And this seems to be another really good idea, and I just didn't know if that idea had percolated through other towns and through the Regional Planning Commission.
So the answer to that is no. There hasn't been a lot of discussion on it. I think right now, a lot of municipalities, Colchester, Williston, South Burlington, have already created these utilities. They've already purchased a lot of equipment. They've got their system already set up. I think where there's a potential is where we have municipalities such as Shelburne that doesn't have anything set up. So we're partnering with South Burlington. So we're starting, hopefully, something that may continue. You can't force other communities to join. So it's there's been some talk of some other communities possibly joining in with South Burlington, but I think those talks have stalled, and they've decided that they're not going to do that at this point. So,
And I don't think there's any, sorry to cut in, I don't think there's anything that we might be doing here in Shelburne by going through this process that would like prevent regionalization in some form. So I don't think, I mean, I would say it's not worth halting this process to think about regionalizing in the future when I think we can do both at the same time and not, and be fine. And some things are regionalized. We do some things through regional planning, through countywide. So there are portions of it that are regionalized.
correct. And the way we're setting the utility up here is slightly different than the way the other municipalities have done it. They actually have, they're their own entity, where what we're doing is we're partnering with South Burlington. So we're not going out and purchasing street sweepers and Vector trucks and all that type of stuff, or taking on additional staffing or a huge amount of additional staffing. We're relying on South Burlington for some of that. So we contract with them. So in a sense, we're hopefully
Moving in
planting
that
a seed that other municipalities may look at this and say, hey, this is a pretty good model, and there could be some savings and efficiency there, so.
Thanks.
We affirmed the decision in January, I think, wasn't it? November or January as to mission? Is there any change in that would
Not, if the board is satisfied with the mission statement as is, I would recommend.
was at that point.
I think it was just understood that the board was likely gonna change over in some fashion, and it'd be.
Sure.
Since this is the board that will actually adopt the ordinance potentially, you should make a motion.
Did you need to hear from me? Is
They need
that
to hear
it?
from Mary, that's right. That's right.
Well, I fully support, at risk of burdening Jamie with several here in a row, which is going to be a considerable effort on his part. We're all grateful for his willingness to serve, but for the additional reason that it's one of the initiatives we've been meaning to take. That is for individual members of us to affiliate or attach in some substantive way to various commissions and committees and boards, so that there's some feedback, regular feedback, as well as I think it will be a benefit to those same boards, commissions, and committees to have a select board member tracking and hopefully making the process more efficient as we go downstream. So I couldn't be more supportive. Would you?
There's two motions I recommend you consider as a board. I put them in your annotated notes.
First, you want us to consider reaffirming the mission? Is there?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yes, and also setting, well, you can read the motion language yourselves.
So, move to reaffirm our agreement that the Stormwater Advisory Committee should continue moving forward with plans to submit to the Select Board on or around Labor Day 2018, a draft stormwater ordinance.
Second.
And hearing a second, further discussion? Hearing none, will everyone who approves signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. It's unanimous.
Move to appoint Jamie Hines as Select Board Liaison to the SWAC.
Second.
And hearing a second, any further discussion? Last
Do I
chance.
abstain from this, I assume?
Yes. Hearing none, those who approve.
Vote no.
Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And
Will
those
abstain.
opposed, nay. And Jamie abstains. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated.
Thanks.
We look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you,
Dean.
Chris. The next item is to interview and consider reappointments and new appointments to commissions, boards, and committees. Joe, do you want to?
All right, well, I think the first one might be the easiest. So we've heard back, I think it's in your packet, from 3 members of the Veterans Committee who wish to serve again. So that's a reappointment. Someone wants to do that motion. It would be to reappoint Eric Hanley, Bud Ockert, and Jim Donaldson to the Veterans Committee for a term ending April 1, 2021.
Are any of them here?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
These are reappointments.
yeah.
Is there a
So,
motion to that effect?
yeah,
So moved.
And a second.
second.
Second, thank you, Colleen. All of those, any discussion? Hearing none, those of us who approve signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. It's unanimous.
Okay, well, I don't know what order you want to do these in, but I know Lisa Williams is still here. She is a applicant to the Village Dog Park Committee. There is an open 3-year seat. Lisa has already been meeting with me to talk about, she's been tasked even before getting on the committee with relocating the dog park, so she's already been working on it. And the chair, Kay Boyce, also recommends her to serve in this capacity, but she's here.
For the viewing audience at home,
Yes, I'm Lisa Williams.
and us as well, could you,
I've been in front of you, some of you before, on some of the other volunteer projects that I've been involved with the school,
all right?
the playground renovation, and I'm also involved in maintaining some of the town gardens. So I've been working on both of those projects, or school projects and town garden projects, for like 10 or 12 years. So I use the dog park. It matters to me that it's not offensive to people who don't use it. We'd like to find a dry place to enjoy it. And someone asked me to do it, so I have some time, so that's all, really. I would like to also introduce, may I, Bob Owens is actually the new chair,
Okay.
starting soon. He's in
Okay.
the audience,
Thanks, Bob.
already on the committee.
Yeah, so I'm the new chair. Kay has stepped down, and at our March meeting, I was elected the new chair. So,
Congratulations.
looking forward to serving.
Thank you.
I understand there is a dog park committee event on Friday night here at Town Hall.
Yeah, one of the things we thought we would do to try to create some positive energy and get people involved is have some talks. So there's a talk about, is your dog qualified to be a therapy dog? In a few more weeks, we'll have one of our local veterinarians come and speak about leptospirosis and Lyme disease. And then further on in the middle of May, we have another event coming. So we have some door prizes and various fun things.
But you're not supposed to bring your dog with you when you
No
come?
dogs. It's in this building. So. Right. So that's all.
Would
Move to
Any of us-
appoint,
would any of us like to ask Lisa a question, or are we ready to
no.
call a question?
Move to appoint Lisa Williams to the Village Dog Park Committee for a term ending April 1st, 2021.
Okay.
Second by Jamie. Calling the question. Any further discussion before? Hearing none. Will all of those who approve her appointment signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And those
Thanks,
opposed,
Lisa.
nay? Thank you, Lisa,
Thank
very
you,
much
Lisa.
for the
Thanks for
service.
everything that you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Congratulations.
Okay, I believe you have at least one applicant here. I don't know if I know David, but
Yeah, he's
there's
here.
David. Okay. He applied for the Development Review Board. I know that this board would like to have chairs of the boards, at least go through them. I don't know if it counts that Mary was a past chair of the DRB, and I think, anyways, Mark's here, so. But David is here to interview for that position.
Would you like to join us, David?
Dave Hellman, I live in Country Lane, and members of the Select Board, I would be really pleased, very pleased to serve on the DRB. It's important for me to contribute to the community, and I think that this is a good spot for me to be to do that. My background, I am manager of facilities and planning at the UVM Medical Center, and so I've been there for close to 30 years, so I've worked with a lot of architects and engineers and planners, been in front of an awful lot of boards looking for approvals, authorities having jurisdictions, and other entities as such, so a lot of experience there, and probably differently from other members on the board is I've been there as an owner, so that experience is brought to the table. And in that position, I think one of the things that I've really learned is the importance of working people and understanding where everybody's coming from, and that's how you get things done. I've served Shelburne in the past, various roles. Most recently, I served as chairman of the facilities committee that worked on the improvements down at the Shelburne Community School. I started out as a member on that committee, and then when the bond vote failed, the next morning I was like, well, we just can't let that be. I felt pretty strongly that this was a real important thing for the community. Personally, you know, I had no kids in the school. They'd all left and graduated and gone, but it was just an important thing, so I brought the group back together. We talked about what we were going to do, and I was elected to be, I guess, the chair of the committee, because I kind of saw that, like, we got to get it done kind of thing. So we took a different approach, and as you know, bond was approved and essentially endorsed by the community. So another thing that I enjoyed working at here, I wouldn't even say it was working because I had a lot of fun with it. I worked with Dean Pierce on ancient roads, and you probably, a lot of you probably don't know what that is, but it was really neat digging through the history of Shelburne, trying to find out where these old roads might be, and just learned a lot about the community, what was. It was kind of neat to drive around and geez, that used to be a schoolhouse there back in the 1800s or something like that. And I actually got to read through some old select board minutes, and it was kind of like the Norman Rockwell kind of theme behind a lot of them. So anyways, I would be very pleased to serve in that function. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mark, would you like to speak for yourself, if not for fellow members?
David would make a great candidate. Endorse him 100%.
Well, can't get better than that.
And any questions from the board? Anything?
None.
I guess I had one question, Dave. I mean, your resume is incredible, and your contributions to the town are tremendous. Just given your role at the hospital, do you foresee any conflicts? You know, you have a quasi-judicial board. The conflicts are as high a standard as you can think about. So I just raise that as something to think about.
Yep, that's a really great question, and I actually thought about that. Personally, I would have no problems with that, but I certainly would welcome if there were engineers, architects, or whomever that I have worked with and continue to work with on the professional level. If they raise the issue, I would certainly recuse myself for anything that required decisions.
Thank you.
Move to appoint David Hillman to the DRB for a term ending April 1st, 2021.
Colleen has moved his appointment.
Second.
Is there a second? Josh seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those of us who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you, David, very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
For taking the step and for serving.
Okay, you have two applicants here, I believe, for the Planning Commission. There's one open spot. John Day and Stephen Solin have both put their name into contention for the Planning Commission. And certainly, I think, well, you know, I don't want to insert myself, for it's not my decision, but I think they're both excellent candidates, and it's just important to remember that the seats on the Planning Commission, it's not uncommon for another one to come up, you know, in a few months. So, you know, if only, there can only be one winner, I guess, tonight, but there'll be another one waiting in the wings for a seat that's going to come up likely in the future.
Well, I mean, is Jason still here? No, he's gone. I mean, I back to what Jerry said earlier, I think my preference would be certainly in these situations, for the Planning Commission to have a chance to review the candidates and, if necessary, make their recommendation as to who they feel would be most appropriate to serve on the committee, because as most committees, they know what the needs and talents are for the committee. So I would suggest that rather than making a decision tonight, that these get forwarded to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation.
So the chair, I agree with you. The chair did ask me to do that. I had a little bit of a dialogue with Jason prior to seeing Steve's resume, so I think his was a late-breaking addition, perhaps, for
I got my
purposes
packet out a
of
little bit
this
earlier than
consideration.
normal.
So, and I believe the Planning Commission also spoke to a potential interested candidate at a prior meeting, who's not before us tonight. So that's neither here nor there, but it's good that there's interest.
So, sorry.
So just Jason's view is that they need a hand on deck, ready to go at the next meeting. I think they're generally supportive of, I mean, both these candidates are excellent, right? I mean, I think everybody knows Steve well, and John interested in.
I think I can help resolve the issue.
Well,
You're being very diplomatic.
come forward, please, John. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My name's John Day, and I have 40 years of experience as an attorney. I've been coming to Vermont for 15 years. I became a Shelburne property owner about 3 years ago, and became a full-time resident last year. My legal practice wasn't in land use law, but my pro bono work in Connecticut, where I lived, was. I was basically on Connecticut's version of the Development Review Board, which in Connecticut is an elected post. I was elected to the board for 11 years. I was elected chair of the board for 10. One of the slight differences, perhaps, with the Shelburne board is that in Connecticut, the boards manage litigation that involves appeals from their decision. So I, in effect, interacted in the legal context as well. Having said all that, and I wanted to come up and introduce myself to the board and make sure that you knew that I was interested in some opportunity to serve. There's no doubt in my mind, especially for an immediate position, that my good friend and architect, Stephen, is better qualified. So I'm going to take all of you off the hot spot and suggest that he be accepted, but I would certainly appreciate your considering my credentials for any future openings.
Thank you,
Thank
Joe.
you, thank you.
It's very graceful and
It
generous
is.
of you. Is that an acceptable
Uh,
step?
I guess,
Yeah.
Steve, do
wanna
you
talk?
want to say a couple words? I think everybody knows you well, but at the same time, I do just wanted to reconfirm that you have availability to do it and are available for the next meeting, if that's possible for the Planning Commission. And I would ask you the same question, just given your profession, that I asked to Dave as well, with respect to conflicts. If you have any concerns, less of a, it's not a quasi-judicial board, but the ordinance applies.
Okay, that's a bunch of things. But first, thanks, John, for letting these guys off the hook. I didn't realize that that you were looking to go after the same position when I put my name in. So anyway, that was a nice way to diplomatically make it a little easier on everybody. Anyway, just some background for those who don't know me. I'm Stephen Salan. I've had an architecture firm with my wife Judith in town for the past 19 years, and we've lived here for 26 years. I've been in front of Planning Commission, Zoning Board many times on this side of the table, and I appreciate all the work that everybody does. It's the nature of a volunteer town office or boards. So I feel like this is my turn to step up and do some of that volunteering. As far as the time allocation, that's quite an agenda that, Dean, you...
Right. You saw what the next
away.
year looks like?
Yeah.
Or the summer as well.
Wasn't that
It's-
timely?
Yeah, and a whole lot of work that's been done already. Yeah, I'm willing to commit the time. I'd be excited to work on helping to wrap up the town plan. And I'd be available to make the next, well, when is the next meeting anyway?
10th?
I think you said 12th.
12th?
The 12th.
Yep.
No, I can't make the next meeting.
John?
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Anyway, I'm away for that week, just unfortunately. But anyway, you're welcome. You have another excellent
no.
candidate right there. But as far as the idea of any conflicts of interest with, since we do represent our clients in front of the Planning Commission and or their issues in front of the Planning Commission and their projects in front of the DRB, yeah, I would, of course, I think I'd have to recuse myself from any of those and be glad to be as honest as I can be as far as identifying those conflicts.
Do you foresee many of those? I mean, I ask because the group would hate to see you on the bench more than at the table, right?
If
I mean,
this were the DRB we were talking about, I'd probably have to do it more. I don't think I would have to. I don't see a case. Dean, you would probably know better, which ones would constitute that.
I mean, it's hard to anticipate, it's just people come up with proposals, right, like you have before the commission, so
Yeah.
it's a little hard to foresee what they might
Yeah,
be,
it's-
but,
It really is
yeah.
anyone's guess, because, you have represented a lot of residents of Shelburne who may have a particular interest in pursuing before the planning commission, and whether or not it's even had any role in it or not, the appearance of the conflict. And I know the planning commission doesn't have the same standard
Right.
as the DRB. I want to mention that the date of the next meeting is the 12th, and it's really unclear that we'll have a quorum. And I'm not sure if Jason had mentioned in his communication with you, Jamie, that having a person who can help deal with some quorum issues in the spring is important. And as soon as this coming meeting, literally.
right,
Well, we assume Stephen's going to double down,
yes.
having missed the first one.
Right now, we only have one applicant.
That's right. That's all I have.
Does the planning commission have a couple of alternates?
No.
Statute
Well,
allows for
yeah.
alternates of the planning commission only when a planning commission serves as the role of a reviewer. So if Shelburne didn't have a DRB and the planning commission did subdivision and site plan reviews, then the statute would give them authority to have that.
There's 7 members, so
Oh, okay.
you hope you don't have quorum issues as often as a 5-member board, but
Well,
Great, Steve. Thank
I'd be
you. Yeah.
excited to serve on the planning commission.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
always appreciate
Absolutely.
volunteers, and thank you so much, John, because it's hard to turn away a volunteer, especially really highly qualified ones. So I'm
we're going
very
to bring
happy
you back, don't worry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna put you on the list. So move to appoint Steve. I'm sorry, is it
Selin.
Selin? Stephen Selin to the Planning Commission for a term ending April 1st, 2020.
Second?
And seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none, with those who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. It's unanimous. John, thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
Thank you
John.
both.
Thank you
Stephen.
both.
I don't know that you'll even going to have to redo your letter.
No. Change the date.
Thank you
So,
very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to point out, I think that there might be one opening on the Cemetery Commission now, but I think there's like 120, close to 120 volunteer CBC positions, and all but one is filled in Shelburne. I think that's pretty remarkable, quite frankly. I'd also like to let the board know, I think it's important, especially that now there's some new ideas about the boards being involved in the vetting. I know I've talked about this with Jamie, I've talked about this with Mary. I might not be the one necessarily dealing with it, but I strongly recommend that the board work on kind of codifying a policy on this, because it's not fair necessarily for me or the town manager or the public if it's just not clear what the expectations are going to be for the appointment process. So I would hope that's on the to-do list with all the other important things that the board has.
Well, as we know, it's in the proposed rules, so it won't be long before we'll take it up. And meantime, I appreciate the efforts of the DRB and the Planning Commission on a fairly short notice to help us with your view. In future, there will obviously be more time for that. But thank you again. Thank you, David, for your involvement. Lisa, I think, is gone. And that said, we'll move on to the next item, which is to consider adopting a drug and alcohol policy for commercial motor vehicle drivers for the town of Shelburne.
All right, these are some amendments that Jamie provided to us. Also, there was a few that Peter included as well. So hopefully this is to a point where it's acceptable for the board. Paul Goodrich is good with it. He's kind of the department head that is most responsible. And we have to have a policy like this to be, it's a requirement, so.
Consider a motion?
I have a comment,
Okay.
actually. Policies, of course, have the benefit of being able to be changed much more easily than ordinances. So on that basis, and being very hesitant to disturb adoption of this, given the effort that's gone into it, and being very interested in our moving on, I do have a question which I'd like to leave with you, Joe, and potentially to pass on to Ann.
Yeah, if you ever, we'll try to get, staff will get back, questions if you
Sure,
have them.
it can
this
be
week.
dealt with at a future point, but going through it in some detail, on page 7, there's a reference to EAP, specifically Invest EAP, which is a service based in Burlington.
Yeah.
And the following sentence down at the bottom says, "There is no requirement that employee access those services." But on following pages, there is a requirement, actually, that an employee returning to work has approval from an EAP. My sense is that means Invest EAP. Whereas following references to it are any EAP, of which there are a number. So if you'd be willing to pass that comment on.
I will get an answer. I don't want to, I think I know the answer to that. I don't want to, I'd rather make sure and get the board.
No, of course not.
The
It's just a
answer.
comment to be made.
That's correct.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt the Town of Shelburne drug and alcohol policy for commercial motor vehicle drivers as presented on March 27th, 2018.
And a second?
Second.
Seconded by Colleen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Those of you who approve, please say by signifying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. And thank you to Ann and those.
Yeah, Ann did a lot
beginning with you.
of excellent work. And so, of
Worked
course,
on
to Paul
this.
Goodridge and Peter. So
Yeah.
good effort by staff.
That's super. The next item is to consider adopting the local emergency operation plan.
Sorry, I should have had you amend this in the agenda. It's just not ready. It's not required to be adopted until May. We have a little bit of breathing room, but it's just not ready tonight, so.
So we'll pen this to
Continue.
April
Move
10th.
to continue the adoption of the local emergency operation plan until
April 10.
April 10th meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those of you who approve signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it unanimously. The next item is to consider actions related to the Colleen Haig Award, including the possible naming of the award recipient. And
In that regard, Mr. Chairman, I do have a motion to make. If I might?
Please.
Sorry, did I interrupt you? Sorry. Did I interrupt you?
I'm sorry.
Did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move to rescind the motion to create a committee for consideration, I would like to rescind the decision to create a committee to select the recipient of the Colleen Haig Award. And I would, that we passed on March 13, 2008, at the March 13, 2018 Select Board meeting. And if rescinded, I would then have a follow-up motion to make.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Josh seconds. Is there discussion?
So I know that we've had some discussions, but just to be clear for the public, on what basis are you making your motion?
I am making the motion to rescind because I believe that the Select Board acted too quickly in forming the committee and, excuse the expression, kicking the can down the road with respect to the selection of the 2018 recipient of that award. And I feel that the Select Board did not have enough information in front of it in order to make a well-informed decision about creating the committee and the guidelines for that actual committee to make the decision. So it's a twofold objection that I have. One, kicking the can down the road when we sent out a clear message to the public about what the process would be. And two, creating a committee without doing enough due diligence to determine whether the members of that committee were sufficiently objective to carry out the role we were assigning.
And just to clarify, we're talking about the 2018
Yes.
award?
Yes.
So without knowing what the follow-up motion is, does that perhaps contemplate a committee for future awards?
Did I have a second to the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Could you ask the question again?
I
I'm
guess
sorry, Jamie.
the question was, does the motion that you indicated would follow, does that contemplate a committee structure for future awards?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think it should be in the hands of a disinterested group of people with clear guidelines. And when we create the committee, there should be clear guidelines of who's on the committee and how it would be formed so that they have a charge that they understand.
Any further?
I certainly, I think Mary has it quite well said, and I really appreciate her discussion of where we are now and where we can potentially be.
Is there any public comment?
I promised I wasn't going to tonight, Sean Moran, but in support of Mary's, and I've talked to, in being open and transparent, I've talked to a number of people on the board on this. When the committee was passed with this ordinance, or with this decision the last time, I think the committee had forgotten that one of the committee members had written a letter to the four of you. Mary was not on the board. Certainly demonstrating a complete bias against one of your nominees. And when confronted, this person said, yes, I think this nominee shouldn't be a nominee. And I think that disqualified that person right there. And I spoke to a number of you on this. I want it to be fair. There's a number of great candidates on that. All I wanted is a fair decision. And I think that fair decision should be in the hands of the select board and not that voted committee, because I think that vote one of the two or one of the five, that was another thing. Was it 5 that was voted in? Was it 2? I was very unclear. I looked at that tape and I went, I'm still unclear. So I think putting it aside, starting over is a wonderful amendment or option on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Colleen?
Colleen Haig. I would just like to say that when we had the board meeting and I agreed to serve on the committee in the hopes of moving things along, I too was unaware of any correspondence that had taken place. And when I did, because I believe in inclusiveness of all candidates, and I feel that ethically we have to consider what happened. I decided that I would not serve on this committee or any future committee for the Colleen T. Haig Award, and that would make. I have actually been contacted by several people who make great candidates, who have a history of my work and my volunteerism and my time in Shelburne. And I feel that if they want to volunteer and spend time doing that, I'm pleased to have them on a committee. So I would just like to explain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, Colleen.
Any further comment? Any further discussion on the part of the board?
Just that, this has been such a messy situation. And to be honest, Mary can't take responsibility for this since she wasn't on the board, but, and Jamie, you really can't either. But the rest of us, we awarded the first award last year, and we had an entire year to clarify, I think, what many of the problems now stemmed from. And we put out this charge to the public to come up with candidates, and without a really clear list of criteria of what we had in mind when we first initiated this award. And so it was unfair. It was really just a fail of the select board, even though it was with the very best intentions for a really good cause, and it was supposed to be something that was uniting to the community. It ended up being more divisive. You know, where I don't know if I necessarily agree with the idea of that we set up this committee or attempted committee to kick the can down the road. It was more of an attempt to try and apoliticize an issue that shouldn't have been politicized, and that's how it turned out to be. And so it ended up being a negative instead of a positive.
Any further comment? Dr. Min?
The thing that disturbed me when this was first discussed several meetings ago was that there seemed to be a total lack of criteria. And I don't understand how an award can be, or how a slate of nominees or candidates for an award how a selection can be made without those criteria. If there had been criteria so that the public understood it, the applicants understood it, and the people that were going to make the decision understood it, I don't think there would have been all the controversy. So I feel the way to eliminate the controversy is to make a significantly more concrete basis for for the selection, no matter whether it's a committee or you select people. If everybody understands the rules of the game, there won't be so many the possibility of such discrimination. So that was my alarm the very first time it was brought up. I trust that should be step one in fixing this situation. Determine the criteria.
Thank you, Doc.
That's what we tried to do with the committee, right? I mean, the whole concept of the committee was to help develop clear
But none was ever elucidated
criteria
that I'm aware of, or made public that I'm aware of.
No, the motion indicated that that committee would develop the criteria.
Correct.
The motion.
We're all on the same
I
page.
agree. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. That's,
yeah, I think we all agree.
That's what we've struggled with since I've been on the board.
My point in saying what I wanted to say was that's, I mean, it's upsetting that, and I've heard it over and over again, that this is supposed to be a happy award, a nice award, everybody's supposed to feel good. But the reason that it hasn't been that way is not because there are some obstreperous people like me, but because there just weren't any recognizable criteria. That was the cause. So if we can eliminate the cause, we'll be all, I think, would be much to the good.
You're absolutely right.
I think my comment might be that the motion before us is actually to revisit the question. So you're probably getting a little bit ahead of us. Secondly, we're making a concerted effort to recognize what we didn't do in the past or didn't do as well as we thought we were, and I'm sure you are an admirer of that effort tonight. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
I would just say, I mean, I am supportive of the motion because we've had the award's namesake come up and indicate her feelings about it. And if, she's not willing to serve on the committee, our understanding when we voted on that was that Colleen would be involved with that. So I'm open to reconsidering it on that basis. Not because we kicked the can down the road either,
Right.
or
That's how I feel too.
feel differently from week to week. That's all.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. Those approving of Mary's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you.
I now would like to make a second motion. That motion would be to form a committee for the purpose of developing criteria for the Colleen Haig Award for 2019 forward. That's my only motion. I'm sure if I get a second, we'll elucidate it further,
But not for the 2018.
not for the 2018.
Okay, second.
Moved and seconded. Is there a discussion
I have a question.
on the,
I have a question. I think I know the answer because you made the motion pretty clear, but this would be a committee simply to develop the criteria, not also to select.
And to select, I'm sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
That's an important
for
clarification.
2019?
Forward.
And forward. Okay, so it's to develop criteria and select winner. Thank you.
And would the idea be to solicit interest in volunteers for the committee from the general public, or?
Well, I think it's a discussion that we should have if people are open to considering the motion so that we can add more meat to the bones. So, yes, in my opinion, there should be 5 people on the committee, I believe. I believe it would make sense to select people who have been in Shelburne for a long time, perhaps consult with Colleen Haig in terms of who has contacted her. People who come to mind immediately are somebody like Tom Little, who's been the town moderator for many, many years. Maybe a select board member. I'm open to a discussion about the complexion of that committee, and I would ask that once formed, that the committee develop a set of guidelines. Maybe there should be somebody from the select board. Maybe there should be somebody from town staff. I don't know. Certainly open to a discussion about that, and would be happy to receive any sort of friendly amendment in that regard.
Or that can be a discussion after the motion has been made, the committee, we've decided to do that, then.
I think we need to send very clear set of guidelines and expectations for the committee.
Correct.
And that's a discussion we have to have. If we have it right now, that's fine. I don't want to take up a lot of time on it. Maybe we can just vote on the motion and then put additional criteria on at another meeting, if that's acceptable
That's what I was
to the
thinking.
board.
I would favor that we simply take the step tonight to establish a committee responsible for the 2019 award in some number, perhaps we're agreeable 3 to 5. I think it would be premature to seek membership, although I believe Jim Brannigan should be a member, having been introduced as such previously, and I would be very, very hopeful that we could prevail in a couple of months on Colleen, either as ex officio or mentor or in some role to assist it. But I think we could develop some further instruction to the committee on our own in the next few weeks, suggesting the promulgation of criteria and reaffirming our agreement that this is going to be in the hands of the committee for them to do as they see best and fit for in terms of the community. Yes, Doctor.
I appreciate the motion, however, it's extremely vague. You posited a committee, and then outside of the motion, you've made some suggestions. Committee, you said 5, you suggest maybe 5, suggest possibly a member of the select board. To me, it would make a lot more sense to at least add to the motion the phrase, the composition of which will be determined at a future meeting.
We're getting there, Doctor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We're getting there.
Yeah. We're not as articulate as you, but we were mumbling around the same idea.
Okay, but you're about to vote on a
We're about to vote on establishing a committee
committee without any
to be
criteria.
responsible for the 2019 award,
Okay.
to whom we will look for their guidance on establishing criteria, conducting a public process, and which we will provide some instruction for at a future time, including what would seem to be the desirable number of members.
but the composition of the committee is in question. There's nothing to specify that.
No, sir. We're not going to name, we're not planning at this moment, unless others of my colleagues disagree, to name any additional members that haven't been already identified. And we'll agree on what seems to be the most appropriate number at a future point. But you make a very great contribution, and we're appreciative.
And I'll take that as an amendment to the motion, everything that Jerry just said, and I think you got it. Right, Joe?
Got it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we're going to
Could you ask him to read?
That's
What
what
are
I,
we
can we
reading?
restate the motion because it's going all over the place,
Yes,
right?
again.
Well, I mean, since this is to form a committee to develop criteria and select a winner for the 2019 and beyond Colleen Haig Award for a mission and composition to be established at a later date.
Wait, a mission and what?
Composition.
Composition.
Should I say specific mission? I mean, this is kind of a broad mission, but specific mission and composition to be named at a later date. To be determined.
I think the
Perfect.
mission's been done.
Any further comment?
Whatever. Okay.
Anybody needs it to be reread? Well done, Joe, thank you. Okay, call the question. Those of us who approve will please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I have a third motion to make, if you will allow. I would like to move to select from the nominees who were made by various forms, either in the Shelburne News or Front Porch Forum or emails directly to the town manager, that the person who received the most nominations be selected for the 2018 Colleen T. Haig Award, and I understand that person is Jim Warden. I'd like to make that motion that he be selected as the recipient of the 2018 Colleen T. Haig Award.
Second.
Second, is there discussion? Discussion on anybody's part? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. Those of us who approve that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those who disapprove, saying nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shannon. Just as a quick comment to you, we value your help, and we'd like to be on the phone when you communicate to your dad. There will be a question as to time and place, as to what's appropriate, and we'll certainly want to follow up with you on that. So, thank you. The next item of business is to consider approving liquor licenses as the local liquor control commission.
Sorry, Jerry, you need to follow the, if you have my annotated notes in here, you need to,
Oh, we have to
Are there-
constitute.
you have
Yeah.
to, you actually don't need to make a motion, Jerry, but you need to at least open the hearing of the local.
I'll move to commence a hearing. Can I do that? Or
That's fine. Sure.
Commence a hearing as liquor control commissioners?
Second.
And
We're waiting for you to call a vote.
Okay. Calling the question. Those of us who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and disapprove, nay. Ayes have it. Thank you, Mary and Colleen.
So I guess I can ask it. This is a quasi judicial proceeding. So are there any conflicts of interest? The only one on the docket is it's the one that's in there.
Bearded frog.
Bearded frog. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that the one that's in there?
That's what I got. Bearded
Yep.
frog.
Bearded frog is the one before you. Any conflicts? Okay.
Nope. I like
All right.
eating that.
So bearded frog. We do have one more remaining, but it hasn't come in yet. So this is the one. So bearded frog is requesting a first-class license and an outdoor consumption permit. I believe you can take care of both of them with one motion, and then
So
of
moved.
course there's a license to sign, 2 licenses to sign.
Okay. So moved.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain, call the question. Those of us who are approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
those who are disapproving, saying nay. The ayes have it unanimously.
Probably a detail, Jerry, but you probably should ask a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Colleen, Jamie. And
Aye.
those of any discussion, hearing none, those of us who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and who disapprove, nay. The ayes have it. Now, we have, as we know, we had converted 14 into 6A. So the next item of business is number 15, discuss future select board meeting items. Joe has provided us with a list to which, at the moment, I'm going to add just a few things, and then I'd be interested in everybody's take. I'd add the ethics ordinance revision to it.
Yep.
The comp plan, which we've had a very good introduction to tonight. The search, obviously, which is an obvious
Sure.
addition for us. Year end, which may entail a little bit more than just routine, usual housekeeping. Close of the fiscal year. you
Yeah, I
don't know,
mean,
there
yeah,
could be
quite
issues.
frankly, most of that unfortunately falls on Peter's shoulders. You know, you'll get a year-end budget report and things
Yeah.
like that. But, you know, in terms of the board,
Yeah.
there's little to do for the board there.
I entered
Hopefully.
it because it will be in a period of interim as well. So we may have a little more involvement than is usual, and we certainly would want Peter to know we're more than ready to lend a hand on that. And the last that I added was the idea of initiating budget this year earlier than perhaps we did last year. I think that's a benefit in terms of what we know will be a challenging budget, A, and B, of a new manager.
That's gonna be.
Yeah, who
Yeah.
would probably value as much experience with the budget before we get into the formal meeting by meeting.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount that concept. I just want to remind the board, I mean, at least from when I started, we've pushed the budget process up at least a month.
As it was, yeah.
And it's really stressful on staff. We have a very limited staff here. So I just want the board to be mindful of any changes. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I can't stress enough that it's a tremendous amount of pressure on staff to get the budget done as early as we get it now and to keep moving that ahead. I just want to throw it out there that could be a challenge, but of course, we're a team, and so we'll talk about it.
Well, just to quickly address that, because that's a very useful comment, one of the things we might be able to do is pick out of the process things that could be done early without being burdensome. For instance, responses on department heads to -3, even +3, which they could develop fairly independently of Peter. And it may be possible that we can get enough of a start as well to involve the new person, who will be knee-deep in it, I'm sure, by then. So I added that. Any discussion?
The only other thing that I would say about that is, along with, starting the budget process earlier, is that we have so many other things to.
Oh, my Lord, I know.
Yeah, and so I'm a little bit worried about
Yeah.
trying to add the budget in even earlier when it seems like all of our meeting time is gonna be well taken up.
I agree. It couldn't qualify as the activities we've just reviewed. It would have to be a second tier item. Maybe one
Like
or
a
two of us
short-
could just follow it
Yeah.
and just track it, and every once in a while make input in the way of just brief reports. It can't compete with these two priorities, obviously.
And, Mr. Chairman, I think the board is probably going to want to consider, contracted services. Is that correct?
For.
You have
Yes,
all
contract-
sorts of contracted
Yeah.
services. You have an auditor,
Correct.
you have
Oh.
legal contracted services. These are,
We have information tech,
right.
and that's an item that we will want to consider as well. So the listing is just meant to give us a little bit of a lattice work, because you will all introduce various other things in this strategic planning session, even the initial one. But I thought this would be helpful as framework.
Well, that was sort of my clarification are these items for discussion at the retreat, sort of in a prioritization mode? Are we going to add more items? And if that's, so that's that, you can answer that question. That question would be first, and I'll have another. I can go after that.
My sense is we would want that our biggest need, other than the particulars of search and interim, at this point are to create a timetable of critical decisions, back it down so we know what the most important inputs are. One of which is Joe's, presence, as long as he's here, and to be very aware of the so-called big picture. I think further than that, we should make room for rules. We decided we would consider rules, and in that process, I think it would be good if we came out all together on what maybe were a group of priorities, not necessarily an absolute list, and an awareness of what we're looking at. I think that's the most important thing. Okay. Search and interim is not everybody's experience, and at points in time it can be very commanding. So I'm concerned about where we prioritize our time and energy, and then we have another session later in time to sit with the new person and address items further.
Can I recap that, Mr. Chairman? I'm trying to keep sort of tabs in my mind as to what we'll be talking about when we meet a week from today. And I have 3 things down, just distilled from your conversation, having an agenda of the critical decisions and big ticket items, addressing our rules, and search and interim.
Yes.
Those
I would think that would be.
And critical decisions, would it be an umbrella topic for many of these? Is that what we're thinking about?
Well, my sense is that we could, in fact, I asked Joe about whether we could take advantage of the expertise. Chris Robinson has left, but he's got wonderful software that displays this graphically. And I had an idea that if we don't do that, my sense is we erect a lattice work so we know what's coming by what due date, and therefore have some sense of being able to figure out what the demands are going to be on us. And if things can be deferred without loss or damage, we certainly could agree amongst ourselves. If other things, if we allow room for search, because search can kind of mushroom, as you know. And in terms of rules, it would be to address what the proposal is, decide on which of them we thought, on which we agreed, and go to the April 10th meeting and codify those. And on the search and interim, it would be to reach to have a good, thorough discussion of what we plan to enact April 10th.
For item 1, you're really looking for a calendar. You call it a lattice work, but a sort of a timeline of sort of the way.
Timeline is going to help, but there's another way of looking at it in terms of what is the energy need. So some weeks are going to require a lot more of us, and some weeks less. And I think we ought to be agreeable. I mean, it's wonderful that Jamie's taking on these 2 major responsibilities. But
You have 2 now?
Yeah, did I take 2?
What's the second one?
Yeah.
I thought I only took 1.
You
I don't know.
Stormwater?
You have stormwater.
Yeah.
Well,
Stormwater.
I mean, I'm still somewhat uncertain of the list of items here. Is this the total, or when are we going? When's the opportunity to identify additional items and have the community? Now. Okay.
Send them in.
So, all right. So I think we need to sort of, and I can put that along with rules discussion, that if the community has other ideas that they think the select board should consider, then I'd be willing to collate those as well.
Sure.
Along at the same time. And and with that, I think either I mentioned or we talked about sometime this summer actually having a community input session, sort of to help us with the prioritization and sort of look at how we're going to deal with the budget next year. And then just, this minor thing that just keeps coming up again is just the whole audiovisual thing that sort of just, I think we need to have be working on in the background. So
Maybe I could give another example of what's on my mind. The ethics ordinance revision entails a lot of review and of legal language and whatnot. So when we look at what the committee would like to work with as a July 1 adoption, for our parts, it's going to mean a considerable effort on somebody's or several of our parts, which others just simply can't afford because they're otherwise occupied with stuff. So my sense of it is we have a skill set that can apply to things, and in a way we may want to divide up some of these items so some of us can concentrate and not risk our hole every night on every single item.
Right, I think that's a great.
And it goes without saying that this is intended as a team-building activity. That deserves mention as well. I think we're so positively headed in that direction that we sometimes don't give that, as much credence. But that would be my sense. Whereas the midsummer, we would have enough accomplished, a new person in place. We would have probably most of the rules adopted or not. We would be in throes of two ongoing efforts, the stormwater and the comp plan. And we would be able to better inform the new manager. The new person would have fresh eyes to look at all of this.
Yeah.
And
So might I suggest that each board member just deliver ideas to you?
Sure.
Individually, and then you can collate them for
be happy to.
the retreat, and maybe if you're comfortable
Jerry and I
working with
can work
Joe
it
on this
together.
decision making.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually
Cool.
how we've done it in the
Right.
past, is usually we would all contribute ideas of what we thought were of importance or priority in the town, give them to the chair. The chair would literally it was an entire list, and there was probably 30 things on that list.
Yeah, running list.
And then one of the very first things we did at the retreat was everybody look at the list, at what everybody else provided, and then you.
Top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly,
Yeah.
top 5, and that's what we want.
Yeah, no, I'm sure Joe will be willing to.
Yeah.
And I'll try to collect whatever public input there is on this.
So I'd just like to offer to the board, and this can be something more on the retreat, but, to make sure that when we're thinking about this, the board, that you really consider of where the board can be most helpful and where to be careful not to insert yourself in a way with the best of intentions actually could make life for staff more difficult and more time consuming. So for example, I strictly see the ethics ordinance. I mean, that's a legislative document. That's a select board thing. I mean, that's something that the board would hopefully take the burden away from staff for having to deal with anything. Now, I'm just, again, Jerry, you just mentioned year end. If you guys get in the way of Peter kind of finishing up the books, again, with the very best of intentions, you're actually going to cause more stress and make it more time consuming. So I hope that when we think about this, especially next week, the board can really identify where can it be most helpful and where does it need to be careful not to overly insert itself
That's a good
and
point.
make life on staff more difficult. And I understand that you guys want to get in there and be involved, and I'm totally for it, but you have to understand that, for all the service that we provide in Shelburne, we have a very much a skeleton crew. And, for everyone on staff, me, Peter, and Chris Robinson, we're going to spend as much time as a public or a select board member wants to spend with us. Just be mindful of that. We have there's a lot of business to do here, and anything the board can do to help out and not overly hover or insert itself and figure out where it can be most useful would be the highest value.
I certainly didn't express any intention of horning in, Joe. I think the point is that we're in a time of the year end, where there are frequently questions that rise, and that is a demand on our time, that's all.
Yeah,
In
not just-
October, there would be other things, in December, there would be other things. But I'm just trying to set the stage for what we're looking at over the next 2-3 months.
Is this something that when we email, we should email only to the chair or to you, Joe, or is it something?
Why don't you copy both of me and Jerry? That might be easiest.
Because it's not, it would be a violation of the OML.
Could we not circulate this?
It wouldn't,
Yeah,
it's a discussion.
I think it'll be
it's a
on-
regular
You can
discussion
discuss
of
it.
I think it would
It's
really,
just for scheduling only.
my recommendation is just to,
Just to keep it
Email it to the
organized.
just
Yeah.
Minimize the traffic going like this.
because then it gets confusing, people,
Gotcha.
it just,
Okay.
Fair enough.
keep it simple.
Yep. Okay.
Any ideas are welcome, I mean, you know, chip in.
Great.
Any other discussion? Thank you. The next item is to consider entering executive session. No, excuse me.
nope.
Future select board meeting item, next.
Yeah, we just did.
Yep.
No,
So
we
next
have
item
to
is
make a
consider
finding
entering-
of premature
Yeah, so-
general knowledge of contract negotiations between the select board and the town manager would place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Second.
Right?
Second,
Okay.
any discussion?
Yeah, I have discussion. Again, I may become a broken record on this, is if that's a relevant cultural reference anymore, and maybe I'll be a GIF, is I really would like to encourage the board to limit executive sessions to when absolutely needed. And even though there may be times when it's an acceptable thing to do, it may not be a necessary thing to do. And so, you know, I think there are a lot of sort of practices that have been sort of taken in the past to be, this is the way it's being done. But I really like to consider, if everybody thinks that this is something that needs to be done in executive session, fine. But I'm not quite really sure why it's necessarily needed at this point. But that's, I'll bring this up on a regular basis.
Any further discussion?
Point of order, I guess I'd be interested in knowing, making a finding that premature general knowledge of contract negotiations, we've already identified what the two topics are. It's the 50 days versus probably 30 days, and his pay raise that is $5,000 effective April 1. So those are the two topics. So nobody's going to be surprised there's going to be no premature general knowledge is already known as to what those
Well, there could,
I don't know if
there
that-
could be.
I don't
there
think
could
that's
be
true.
others
I don't think that's
identified.
true.
Then if you want to talk about those, then you can make a motion at that point. But
Well,
We just
when you-
did.
When you
I just
consider
did.
that those are the two topics that you've identified in public, at a public meeting, that you want to talk about, you can at least talk about those two, because, and if it's 50 days, or 30 days, or 20 days, or something like that, people aren't going to be surprised that you're going to let them go early. And they're probably not going to be surprised that he's willing to give up part of his raise to be able to go early. So,
Mike, no disrespect, but you can't talk about them in isolation. There may be more issues that come up during executive session, which fall under the contract negotiation umbrella, so.
and then at
I
that
think
point, you
it's
can
an appropriate
go into executive
motion.
session at that point.
I tend to agree, and that was essentially the basic point that I was trying to make, is that we have already identified the things that need to be discussed, and it's sort of, to me, it's something we could take a vote on at this point. If people feel that there are other things that would need to be considered or brought up, that's possible, but it's hard for me to understand, you know, to vote for understanding why there would be a premature, whatever the language is, burden on the select board. I
There's
mean,
no substantial disadvantage.
that's the word.
You won't be able to find that, and that's what you have to find in this motion.
Well, I think we can find it. I think
agree.
we can find that,
You can find anything, but literally find it. I mean, in
no,
your heart.
I think, we don't know what Joe's gonna say with respect to the discussion surrounding, his April 1
Right.
raise.
I mean, we don't know what his proposal is. We haven't
we
had an
have to
opportunity to
respond to
talk
it.
to the town manager about this request. He's spoken to the chair. We haven't talked about it directly, so we may all have different views, and the
Read his
proposal may
contract, though, I
change.
bet.
About what?
Have you read his contract?
Yeah,
I'm familiar with the contract, but
we have, I think most of us have it with us for purposes of having an intelligent conversation with Joe when we go into executive session to talk about negotiating its terms. Which I understand is an employment matter as well, and that should also be an executive session. Am I wrong?
Nope.
I agree.
I think the turning point, Mike, is there could be other issues of which none of us, having not discussed it amongst ourselves, are aware, much less that might emanate with Joe.
And as noted, at that point, you can make a motion. But the other two topics that you publicly identified on TV and in this group of people here,
Yeah.
you've already identified what the topics are.
But we can't
would
talk
assume you're
about
gonna
those in
come out
isolation
and-
without recognizing that there might be
Talk
something
about
else.
those, and then if you want to talk about something else later, that's fine.
He's right. You're absolutely right about that, but I don't think we intend to talk about anything other than.
Those are, I disagree. I mean, he brought up topics. He brought up sections of the contract
Yeah.
that are going to be discussed by the entire board.
Who did?
Jerry.
Me,
Jerry did.
But those
I
are
didn't
just
bring up
two subjects, two possibilities. And so we can't discuss all of it in entirety. I mean, that's what we're gonna go in and discuss. If there's other issues that come up. I'm like, to me, this is simple. Okay, we disagree.
This is exactly what the exemption was designed to address, is contract negotiations.
No, it wasn't. And it helped break the laws, I know.
This is what that's what the statute says, Mike. It says contract negotiations in the exemption.
Where you'd be placed at a substantial disadvantage. And you
Right.
haven't been placed at a substantial disadvantage.
That's for the board to determine.
all right, thanks, Mike. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to call the question. Those who are.
Was there a second? Colleen?
Yeah, Colleen seconded.
I moved.
Oh,
I'll second it,
Jamie
but it hasn't
seconded.
been.
Sorry, Colleen, I thought yours was. Any further discussion? I'm going to call the question. Will those who approve signify by saying aye?
Aye.
And those disapproving say nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Did Mary vote aye?
Aye, sorry.
Okay, move under the provisions of 1 VSA Section 313A to enter executive session for the purposes of the contract between the select board and the town manager and invite the town manager.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jamie. Any further discussion?
Yes. I just want to say, and I know I'm behind, but I'm slow, forgive me. It is, I think, perfectly proper to go into executive session for the purpose of evaluating an employee. It's section 313A. 3, and I regard this as part of that process. So that's why I am voting to go into executive session. And
Yeah, I mean, if it'd make everyone feel better, Mary too, you could pass a motion to enter into, for contracts like this, and then you could do a separate one if you would like to for what Mary cited.
I
don't even know what-
He's on the way out the door.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
there's going to be evaluation of, there, absolutely, and more than that. I intend to have a discussion in executive session about Joe's contract and whether or not he deserves to get the raise under his contract. I have other questions to ask him having to do with his performance.
Mr. Chair, we have a
So-
motion, seconded.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was waiting on Mary
I'm
finishing.
done, I'm sorry, I
Sound
apologize.
set?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. Those of you who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those who disapprove saying nay.
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 Did you
The
vote
ayes
nay,
have
Jerry?
it.
Or was that a
One
yea?
nay from Josh.
Okay.
You didn't vote nay?
No.
Oh, it sounded like you did.
No. Is there a motion to exit executive session
So
at
moved.
9:40? So moved by Josh, a second.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Those of us who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those who disapprove, nay. Ayes have it. We're resuming general session.
So I make a motion to accept the following modifications to the contract between the town of Shelburne and its current town manager, Joe Colangelo. Joe Colangelo will stay on will staff the April 24th Select Board meeting. He will stay employed on or about April 27th. He will continue to be on call for questions from staff and Select Board members until 7 a.m. on July 27th, 2018. Based on these conditions, we accept his resignation.
Thank you, Colleen. Second.
So moved. Second,
seconds.
sorry.
And further
What's the
discussion.
date, July what?
27th,
July 27th?
July 27th. He'll be on call until then.
Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Those of us who approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those who disapprove, nay. The ayes have it unanimously.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Any further discussion? Those of us who approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nay, those who disapprove saying nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, Joe. That's a sad task for us.
You're stuck with me for 2 more meetings, so,
Yeah.
but thank you.